We are at 5 minutes past 8 o'clock. And if you've just joined us, good evening from me, Nthakoana Ngathane, and welcome to Inside EWN on 702 and Cape Talk, brought to you by your trusted EWN news team. In the second hour, we're talking all things SADC. Now, SADC is the Southern African Development Community that was established as a development coordinating conference in 1980, but was transformed into a development community in 1992. It's a multilateral intergovernmental organization, and its goal is to promote sustainable and equitable economic growth and socio-economic development, cooperation and integration, good governance, and durable peace and security. And it has 16 member states. Now, SADC has been in existence for almost 40 years now, but today we'll be talking about what it has achieved in recent times. It's headquartered in the Botswana capital, Gaborone, and we're joined from Gaborone by from the SADC Secretariat by Director of Finance, Investment and Customs, Sadiwick Mutonakuga. In Johannesburg, we're joined by Dr. Victor Shale, who's a governance and elections scholar and political analyst. And in Zimbabwe is Rashid Mahiya of the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition. It represents more than 80 civil society organizations in Zimbabwe, from churches, women's organizations, labor unions, human rights lawyers, teachers groups, and health professionals. Now, Sadiwick, if I can briefly start with you, if you can just give us an overview of the various functions that SADC performs to fulfill this mandate that we just spoke about.
Thank you, Nthakoana. If I can, you already started mentioning why SADC exists. I think as articulated in the Treaty of SADC, SADC exists to achieve development and economic growth, and in that context, alleviate poverty, enhance the standards of living of the people of Southern Africa. That's the broad objective of SADC. Under it, there are some objectives to deal with politics, defense, security, but also exploiting complementarities among its member states in terms of resources, including natural resources, but also human resources. And this has to be achieved through cooperation and regional integration. Now, to achieve this objective, broad objective, SADC implements its programs through a strategy which is called Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan. This is the strategy that guides the implementation of its projects and programs in different areas. The first strategy was formulated in 2005, and implementation started that year for 15 years, and it has just expired this year, 2020. But before that, it was revised in 2015. And amongst the areas which implementation takes into effect, it's that it focuses the area on industrial development and market integration. And these are issues to do with development of value chains in different sectors, just to deal with the supply side or the production side of our economies in the region. But on the integration side is to deal with the markets themselves. How are member states trading amongst themselves through the different goods they produce within the region? That is one area. But there is also another area which SADC deals. Integration and industrial development cannot happen in a vacuum, but it has to be supported by a functioning infrastructure. So the area of infrastructure, particularly focusing to support that infrastructure to support regional integration and industrial development, that's the second area. And the other area deals with social development and supported programs. And these are to deal with health issues, education issues, also issues relating to gender, but also relating to the youth. These are some of the sectors which SADC deals with, but also not forgetting the sector peace, security, and the politics, peace, security, and the defense sector, which is can be considered to be the foundation of SADC. Because without peace, without political stability, you can't have you can't develop the way you want to develop because of that instability in those sectors. So these are some of the sectors, and just during the last summit, as you are aware, before summit, there are preceding meetings. And one of the important preceding meeting is the Council of Ministers meeting. This is the structure which looks at the progress in terms of implementation of these areas I've just mentioned. And the sitting in the past 2 weeks, Council was looking at the progress in implementation of specific programs in these specific areas. If I can stop there, that's the background of what SADC does and what it has been doing in the past. But the details, I think I can be catching up as we go on in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadiwick. Now, Dr. Shale, if I can just bring you on, this picture that Sadiwick has painted is an idealistic picture. You've worked with SADC, you've worked with the AU, you've worked with multilateral organizations the world over, and you've observed elections, you've advised many countries on governance. Is SADC fulfilling this mandate, or at least making a difference? Give us a scorecard.
Thank you, and for having me on your show tonight. And thank you for the opportunity. I think what we need to, first of all, appreciate is the journey that has been taken so far. If you look back 40 years, a lot of challenges have been encountered in the integration of the region. But certainly, if you look at the SADC region now and SADC region 40 years ago, a lot has happened. If, for instance, taking from what my colleague from SADC has just said, there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done. And with very little resources, I think we need to appreciate. That is the first. Secondly, is that one of the things that I think are problematic in terms of SADC being able to achieve its goals as quickly as we would like to, is the fact that it is dealing with a lot of challenges on many fronts. And you have here a grouping of countries in the SADC region which, notwithstanding the noble idea to come together, to join hands to achieve more, the reality is that our historical, political, and economic situations are many and varied. And so in SADC, my observation is that as SADC strives to achieve, especially the economic enhancement and development, one of the major reasons has been the incessant conflict, intrastate conflicts. So you'll find that as a result, if you look at the SADC structures, you'll find that the organ on defense, politics, and security cooperation is actually the busiest of the other sections. And I guess the official from the SADC Secretariat would attest to this. Now, what that also does is that we then end up thinking that SADC's main purpose and agenda is to firefight, to deal with the intra, because of course we have since moved as the region and indeed the continent from interstate tensions. We are now focused on intrastate problems. So it sometimes tends to be misconstrued that SADC's main job is to deal only with the challenges, political and conflict situations. So I'm saying those become an impairment for SADC to deal with the equally pressing economic programs. He was talking about education, we're talking about regional integration. So on balance, I can say much has really been achieved, but more still needs to be done. But for SADC as an entity to be able to be seen to be making headway, member states also have to come to the party in terms of improving on governance processes, in terms of ensuring that they can deal with some of the challenges that arise that end up slowing down the regional agenda, because now you consistently have to be focusing on some of these member states.
Now, part of the reason we're having this conversation is because not only is SADC bringing together these countries, but it also takes away some of the resources in order to run. 256 people are employed by SADC at its headquarters in Botswana. It spends about $56 million every year, at least in the 2019-2020 financial year. And that does not even include salaries for those people that I'm talking about. It's basically just for programs to be implemented. I'm going to bring in Rashid. Rashid, Zimbabweans have made it no secret that they're disappointed that SADC said nothing, even though Dr. Shale says we tend to look at only the political and not the economic and other responsibilities such as industrialization that SADC has. But Zimbabweans have not made it a secret that they're disappointed that SADC said nothing about that country during last week's summit when it met. And this is despite daily reports of arrests of civil society, of members of the opposition, of journalists, and even after South Africa sent envoys there a week earlier to assess the situation. But also, the disappointment didn't only begin now. It began when President Emmerson Mnangagwa was made chair of the Politics, Defense and Security Organ last year. Rashid?
Thank you. Yes, and thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Rashid. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Zimbabweans are disappointed, largely because the citizens feel that the government of Zimbabwe has turned against its own citizens, that the government of Zimbabwe is not respecting the rights of citizens. Journalists are being arrested for trying to hold the state to account, and they are on their own. Lawyers are being arrested when they carry out their duties at courts. They are on their own. People are abducted by state security forces in the dark, still of the night, and dumped at police stations, sometimes not dumped anywhere close to them, and nothing happens. People have lost confidence in state institutions like the judiciary, the state institutions that are responsible for the protection of citizens. And Zimbabwean citizens ask because they are not asking SADC to do what it has not done before. Because if you go back in history, you go back to 2008, 7 and 8, SADC brokered a political agreement, the global political agreement in Zimbabwe, which brought about the conflicting parties, the intra-party conflicting parties in Zimbabwe, which led to the formation of a global government of national unity then. And there were specific benchmarks that were put in place, milestones that were put in place. And Zimbabwe actually has got a new democratic constitution as a result of SADC intervention. But the reason why Zimbabweans get frustrated is because in 2017, SADC allowed a military coup to take place in Zimbabwe. and kept quiet. And what we are seeing now are the effects of what took place in Zimbabwe in 2017. So the reason why Zimbabweans are frustrated and are very clear about what SADC has not done is because Zimbabweans feel offended. Because if you go back to the history of the frontline states, go back to the history of the liberation, the issue of integration and solidarity within SADC protects the citizens. But citizens feel unprotected and SADC hasn't done much. We continuously continue to appeal to SADC, largely because there are no options. When the state is failing to protect its own citizens, Zimbabwean citizens are appealing to SADC so that they are protected, so that SADC mediates in the conflict in Zimbabwe, so that there's a national dialogue that brings all citizens to stakeholders that tries to identify the Zimbabwean question. So Zimbabweans are not happy with SADC because SADC seems to have ignored. It seems like there's solidarity in SADC between heads of states and citizens that find themselves on their own. So that is the position of citizens in Zimbabwe.
Right. Now, Sadiwick, if I can bring you on now, you saw the summit last week. It came out with a communique that spoke about Lesotho. It spoke about the DRC Zimbabwe border issue. It spoke about Mauritius for the environmental disaster in its waters. It spoke about Mozambique and the solidarity that SADC has and the commitment to support Mozambique in addressing the terrorism and violent attacks in that country. Now, if you take off your hat as a SADC official and be just an ordinary individual, does it make sense for you that SADC did not even discuss Zimbabwe under the circumstances that Rashid is talking about?
Thank you again. Yes, SADC notes the developments which are happening in Zimbabwe, especially the recent developments, and it's observing the developments. But you will note that SADC, the approach it has taken, we have to understand that the recent events are a progression of developments which have happened in the past. And most of these, they are coming from the fundamental issue is that they relate to social, economic issues. Cost of living is going up, the economy is not functioning, and because of various reasons. And this has resulted in some of the current developments. Now, you recall that last year, to deal with that last year, SADC came in, during the same summit in Dar es Salaam, they came up with a position to deal with one of the aspects which are intended to address the socio-economic issues in Zimbabwe. And this relates to the sanctions. Because although they are called targeted sanctions, in an event of a sanction, you will find that the space for investment is affected, and also the credit spectrum of the member state is affected, and also it's a signal, an indication to investors. An investor in the right mind will not go into a country where some are targeted for sanctions. Now, what SADC did during that summit and is implementing annually is to sensitize and engage the international cooperating partner to lift those sanctions, because from the point of view of SADC, this is seen as the fundamental factor to all the developments, including the recent ones. So that is the approach which SADC has taken, and it is implementing that. You'll recall that even last year, October was dedicated for that sensitization and engagement with international cooperating partners, mainly to focus on those lifting up of those sanctions so that investments can flow in. And what we are seeing, which is a cause to what is all happening, can be addressed. So SADC is silent.
You are heading the finance investment and integration customs function of SADC. And if one looks at what's going on in Zimbabwe, or what can happen similarly to Zimbabwe in another SADC country, one can say that you end up with people moving from that country into other countries. For instance, for Zimbabwe, it's South Africa, it's Botswana, and you end up having xenophobic attacks in those countries because those countries' citizens are not happy because there's not enough to go around for them and those who are coming in as either refugees or economic migrants into their countries. And so the whole point of you trying to integrate the region fails because the citizens of those countries do not see integration as an answer because of what they see with people coming in and taking away the little that they have in their own countries. Don't you think it's counterproductive to not say anything about Zimbabwe or to not say anything about countries that have problems within?
As I mentioned, yes, you are right that when there is an instability in one section of the region, it affects the rest because it's interrelated. If people move from one country where their investments are threatened or their livelihood is threatened, they will move to the other. And within that country where they move in, they will meet several challenges, and including what you have mentioned, xenophobia in some of the member states. And that is a fact. But let me come back to what SADC is doing. It's to resolve those economic issues. And one of it is the lifting of sanctions, because that will give an indication for investment to flow back into that country and to bring back the people. It is one of the measures. It's not everything. It's one of the measures. So let me emphasize on that point. That is the cause. Let's deal with the cause. And one of the ways of dealing with the cause is what SADC has taken to engage the international cooperating partners to lift out the sanctions. Thank you.
You're listening to Inside EWN on Radio 702 and Cape Talk. It's 28 past 8 o'clock, and we have with us here on the round table on EWN from the SADC Secretariat in Botswana, Sadiwick Mutonakuga, who is the head of finance and investment and customs. We also have Dr. Victor Shale, who is a governance and elections scholar and political analyst. And in Zimbabwe, we have Rashid Mahiya of the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition. Remember that you can join this conversation by calling us on 011-883-0702. If you're outside of South Africa, you can call us on +27 8011. I'll start that again. If you are outside of South Africa, you can call us on +27 11-883-0702. You can also SMS us on 31702 or 31567. You can also email us at inside@ewn.co.za and join the conversation on Twitter at #InsideEWN. Now, we're talking all things SADC, and to find out if SADC is what it was meant to be 40 years ago when it was established, and as heads of state meet. This year they met virtually because of COVID-19, but normally they would go to a country like Mozambique that organized this summit this year, but they would gather in one country and they would spend billions and millions of taxpayers' money to do that. But also, as time goes on, every year, the SADC Secretariat employs, as I said, 256 people in Botswana at the SADC Secretariat and other bodies of SADC. It spends $56 million a year to run. Is it making a difference on the continent? Is it for you as an ordinary citizen of SADC? Is SADC doing for you what it should have done? And I have a caller on the line, and that is Thomas in Meyerton. He says SADC must be suspended. Thomas?
Nthakoana, thanks very much for weighing in on this issue about SADC. I think this organ must be disbanded. These guys are actually beating about the bush. They are not answering anything sensible about Zimbabwe and other countries in the region. They're actually living. What do sanctions have to do with the human rights abuse in Zimbabwe? What does that have to do with that? Please help us. This organ must be disbanded. It's a useless organ, that's all. Thank you.
Thomas, if you can just give us a sense of why it is. I hope I still have Thomas on the line. It looks like I've lost. Thomas, do I still have you on the line?
Hello?
Thomas, give us a sense of why it is that, I mean, we've had the story over and over again, but for you, why is it that you ended up being in Meyerton in South Africa?
No, you see, thank you for asking that question. That country called Zimbabwe, I come from Zimbabwe myself. You can't survive in that country. You can't. You really can't. So I decided to run away from that country, coming to Zimbabwe, do something else so that I can survive. That's all.
Right, and we're going to take Mushere in Pretoria. Mushere, what do you have to say about SADC?
Really, this body is useless. Look at what has been happening in SADC. If not last week, this week before last, where ANC selected a few group of people to go and speak to the governing party. It can't be that when you have conflict in the country, you don't include everybody to discuss the matters that are pertaining to the problems in the country. It happened before, even where they calling out those who were pointing out the problems. This time around, it was Mahashule. The last time it was Zulu, where they've been insulted and SADC is doing nothing. You've seen people risking their life crossing the river to come to their neighboring countries. Where is SADC? What is the function of SADC? If the meeting and there's no solution to the problems that we're seeing in the continent, in the region.
Right. Now, Rashid, besides the disappointment with the political function of SADC fulfilling its other roles in Zimbabwe, take us through the sort of work that SADIQ has told us SADC is supposed to be doing: economic integration, industrialization, that is supposed to be felt by ordinary citizens. Are you seeing it in Zimbabwe?
Oh, thank you. Oh, you can hear me now?
Yes, Rashid.
Yes, I speak not only for Zimbabweans, but I also speak for the ordinary citizens of SADC, who obviously might not see the benefits of all the action, the work that is being done by SADC at that level, the technical level. It is difficult for me to talk about the economic benefits of SADC, the economic benefits of integration, especially when the conditions that we live in, particularly in Zimbabwe, are such that it's not conducive for economic growth. If you look at SADC, the SADC regulations, if you look at the SADC protocols, they are very clear on the objective of SADC, that SADC wants to achieve regional integration, it wants to achieve economic development, but they are very clear that there are conditions that should be created for the achievement of such. So while you want us to talk about the economic integration for now, I think I wanted to respond to what the colleague from the SADC office secretariat said about issues of sanctions. Firstly, that is where the problem is, because SADC is burying its head in the sand. In 2018, during the elections, SADC sent a mission, an observer mission to Zimbabwe to observe the elections in Zimbabwe. And there's a report by the SADC mission that is very clear about the lack of trust of institutions. They call it residual mistrust, because people were not comfortable with the Zimbabwe Election Commission and the number of the institutions. They were not comfortable with traditional leaders and their institutions. Why am I raising that? I'm raising that because SADC knows, and it is clearly documented in their reports, in their observer mission to Zimbabwe, and in all other communiques that have come after Zimbabwe have petitioned SADC, that Zimbabweans have a problem internally, locally, that they have to deal with the help of SADC. And one of the major is that there's no trust and confidence in the institutions of the state by the citizens. And that has to be dealt with.
And you as civil society are criticized by people from outside of Zimbabwe to say that you actually don't do enough. Is that the case?
Now as I speak, I've been on remand for the past 18 months. I have a subversion case hanging over my head. If I'm convicted, I'll spend 20 years in prison for doing nothing. The state says we want to subvert a constitutionally elected government. A lie. But you get the point that I'm making. So you cannot say we're not doing anything. We are doing everything we can. But we are even arrested and arrested, humiliated, and victimized for nothing. Now as we speak, we have got about 20 or 30 Zimbabweans, civil society leaders that are facing some charge or another. A lot of them are in prisons. A lot of them are not in their houses. They're running away. They're scared. It's like an apartheid South Africa, and the comrade from SADC is saying that we are doing nothing. We are doing all we can. I don't know what doing nothing means, because what our leaders, our current leaders did when they were faced with colonialism is that they crossed the borders into other countries and started an armed struggle. We are not starting an armed struggle. We are civil society. We want a non-violent, peaceful resolution of the conflicts. That's why we are appealing to SADC. That's why SADC should not talk about sanctions only. We are saying, even if sanctions are an issue, create conditions for Zimbabweans to come together, right? Motivate the ruling party and government to see value in bringing everyone together to say, if there are sanctions, what is the cause of sanctions? It's issues of misgovernance. How do we collectively come together to deal with the issue of sanctions? How do we collectively come together to deal with the democracy and governance issue? How do we as citizens of Zimbabweans do it? And that's what SADC should do, and not to talk about sanctions and while they're drinking tea on citizens' taxpayers' money.
Right. Now, let me take Kgarebe, because he also wants to talk about going back to why sanctions were implemented in Zimbabwe. Kgarebe, in Birmingham?
Hello. Yes, can you answer the question? But if we understand the difficulties that the sanctions bring in to the citizens, the whole Zimbabwean citizens, but the question that we need to go back to is, why were they implemented? Because of corruption, one of them, isn't it? So why can't they go there? Why can't SADC address that? Because South Africans are suffering. I work in England, and in my workplace, I'm the only South African, but I work with 10 Zimbabweans. Why? Why are they leaving the country?
Right. We have another comment on SADC. Thank you, Kgarebe. From Touch in Germiston.
Hi, Nthakoana. Good evening, and your guest. Nthakoana, I listened to the secretary there from SADC. I think he's not telling the truth. Zimbabwe doesn't have an economic problem. It's got a political problem, and he's afraid to say so. We've got a political problem, which is also causing an economic meltdown in Zimbabwe. Now, he's going around talking about integration. I don't know what integration means, unless maybe it means me going down the road, you're finding 3 Zimbabweans beggars asking for money. That's what he calls integration in the region. That's not it. You see, and I think Zimbabweans will have to come to terms to the fact that no, they are alone. If they have to depend on SADC, I can assure you nothing will happen. They're going to have to do what Tunisians, Egyptians did, or else nothing will change. Because if we have to depend on these SADC people who are also friends of Mnangagwa, who are friends of Mugabe, surely nothing will change. If Zimbabweans haven't realized that by now, I then get high. We're still going to talk about this in 2050. Thank you.
Thanks, Touch in Germiston. Now, Sadiwick, if I can just go back to how SADC is constituted. In 2000, we saw a tribunal being set up. This tribunal was expected to listen to grievances such as the ones that Zimbabweans have today. This tribunal listened to some of those grievances and ruled for Zimbabweans, but it was also supposed to listen to grievances from other parts of the region, from other citizens of the region. But 10 years down the line, those powers were taken away, and the very same people who sit every year, the heads of state and government, signed to take away the powers of the tribunal to hear individuals going to that tribunal to complain, which is what Zimbabweans or South Africans or any other or citizens of the region could do. Today, as we speak, where is that tribunal? What's happening to it?
Okay, thank you. In 2014, the tribunal, as you rightly said, the operations of the tribunal were suspended, the reason which resulted into the suspensions of the operations was that was relating to jurisdiction. In terms of jurisdictions, it was between because the tribunal was supposed to deal with if a member state is against a member state, how can the dispute be settled? One, but the formulation of that, the outline of that tribunal, which was suspended in 2014.
When you say it was supposed to only listen to states, it did not say that. It also allowed individuals at the beginning. At the beginning, this is why Zimbabwean farmers were able to go to the tribunal and they won. So when
this is where I'm going. This is where I'm going. I'm saying that the issue were relating to jurisdiction. What member states did not want was that it was dealing with member states and the natural persons, which you are mentioning that farmers from Zimbabwe went to the tribunal. And that is what member state didn't want. They wanted member state to member state. So that's why the operations were suspended and they came up with a new legal instrument, another protocol, a new protocol, which removes that element of member state to the natural person, only remaining with member state to member state. And this instrument is is in the process of being ratified. But after the suspension of the operations, what member states have done is that for each instrument which is being formulated right now, there is a provision of settlement of disputes, a dispute settlement mechanism within it to deal with some of the elements. Because you will note that dispute settlement, it's a wide, and the tribunal is just one aspect or the apex of that. But there are elements which can be dealt without the tribunal. And some of the instruments have got those elements already built up in the specific instruments. For instance, if we talk of trade, protocol on trade, to deal with non-tariff barriers, there is a mechanism to deal with that. If a company or a company which is transporting goods across the border meets non-tariff barriers, there are processes to deal with that. So those are the mechanisms. What member states have done is that instead of focusing on the tribunal alone, can we develop the whole institution, which is to deal with disputes in whatever area of integration? For sure, you cannot integrate without a system to settle disputes. And this is well understood.
But I mean, we're talking here, Sadiwick, about ordinary citizens of SADC holding SADC accountable. And Dr. Shale, I want to bring you in. The South African Constitutional Court ruled in 2018 that it was actually unconstitutional for President Jacob Zuma to sign that protocol that took away the citizens, ordinary citizens' power to go to the tribunal. A victory for those farmers in Zimbabwe, but perhaps a victory for other residents of the continent, of the region as well. However, other countries will probably have to go through a similar process for their own constitutional courts or for their own legal systems to declare that protocol unconstitutional before SADC can say that all of it agrees to this. I see it. That protocol that removed the power of citizens from going to the tribunal as an attempt to silence ordinary citizens of the continent. Dr. Shale?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. You know, when dealing with the SADC and the various challenges that arise in SADC member states, it's always a tricky business because now, you know, different countries are going through different spells in terms of the challenges that we see. Right now, we are talking about Zimbabwe. There's a serious problem also in the DRC. There is also even a greater problem. I mean, the Zimbabwe problem is obviously a matter of concern that needs urgent attention, which is intra. But we now have also what I consider as a regional threat that is currently manifesting in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. So what I'm trying to say is, my view is that, like I said in my beginning remarks, I think there seems to be too much expectation on the SADC to be able to solve everything and anything that arises in the 16 member states. And I think that's an ideal expectation. But the reality points differently, my sister, because for instance, when we deal, for instance, on your question around the tribunal, the one thing that I think we need to appreciate before we start dismissing SADC as useless, as some of our callers maybe view it, is that SADC may not necessarily satisfy some of the expectations under certain circumstances. But we also need to appreciate, I think, in my view, that SADC, in terms of its, the treaty and how it is constituted, still has to navigate the equally a sensitive matter of state sovereignty. Because even as SADC was established, the establishment of SADC as a grouping of member states, in my understanding, it does not take away the state sovereignty. So when you talk about the accountability of SADC, perhaps that question should go back to the member states to deal with accountability at that level, because SADC, in my view, would not be able to take the issue of accountability fully without member states themselves in terms of the engineering of state institutions, in terms of engineering of constitutionalism in those countries, deal with matters such as accountability. So I understand the frustration, but I think we need to also just understand whether the SADC, as is constituted now, is really fully equipped to deal with some of those challenges. And I said, this is because you come into the SADC already as member states with the different history, the different political differences, different liberation backgrounds, and all those things manifest in this grouping. And then we expect that the SADC, with the resources that you were saying, has to then be able to respond adequately. Surely, they may be able to respond to some, but they may not be able to respond to some. So accountability, to the extent that they are able to report back on what they are doing, for instance, on regional integration, in terms of what they are able to do in some of the conflicts. I mean, yes, we have now a frustrating situation as far as Zimbabwe is concerned. But we also need to note that not a long time ago, there was some progress where, for instance, you had one of the intractable conflict situations in Mozambique between Frelimo and Renamo, the two parties finally get into some understanding. And by the way, you find that a lot had also been said. I mean, just like we are faced with a situation now in Zimbabwe where there is a feeling in which we are saying things are moving quite slowly, you find that if you look at the Mozambican settlement, it was actually internally driven. So my point is, I think, as Rashid was saying, he is saying create space for Zimbabweans to talk amongst themselves. I think that's a valid point, because in his request, what Rashid is basically saying, from what I understand, is that the responsibility to dialogue and find one another rests with the Zimbabweans. But you need to at least have a neutral broker who can create that space for Zimbabweans to talk amongst themselves. So I think it's a legitimate call, that I think SADC should really consider, because I don't see what SADC stands to lose if it creates that. But equally, the member states in various sectors that make the state need to sit and try to find one another, as the Mozambicans have just proven to us that this is actually possible. It may take long, it may lead to a lot of losses on both sides of the divide, but I think accountability, in my view, going back to your question, should begin internally in member states, creating the systems, engineering the kind of constitutionalism that calls everybody to account, before we can delegate that to be the responsibility of SADC.
9 minutes to 8 o'clock, you're on Inside EWN on 702 and Cape Talk. Remember that you are still with us. You can still SMS us on 31702 or 31567. We're talking all things SADC. Has it done what it set out to do 40 years ago? And you can email us at inside@ewn.co.za, and also our hashtag on Twitter is #InsideEWN. I'm going to try and see if we have anyone on the line who can hear us. I have Tulani in Kwatema. Tulani, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
You're saying SADC has nothing to show?
SADC has nothing to show for 40 years. ECOWAS, that's like the ESCA in East Africa, that was the North African countries, done absolutely nothing. Look now, Shale is supposed to be an analyst, analyzing the post-divide of the problems in Mozambique, problems in Zimbabwe, problems in Angola, problems in Zambia. But he is speaking like he is part of SADC. So that's the disgrace. I think Nthakoana, you'll have to get somebody who will be a real analyst to solve the problem. The problems in Zimbabwe, to be precise, even Rashid was not saying they will have to talk among themselves, because Zimbabweans for years now, they've been crying for help from SADC. SADC has done absolutely nothing. Nthakoana, I think if SADC can be EU, countries like will elect members to go to the party somewhere in Southern Africa, I think it will be debated, because as long as these presidents are appointing themselves to be the president, our said Ramaphosa just said nothing about the beatings of the Zimbabwean people in the last few weeks. So Ramaphosa has done nothing. They've just appointed the guy who has failed to run Mozambique as a chairperson, a guy who was struggling to beat up a small group of ISIS guys in that province in Zimbabwe, so in Mozambique. So I think SADC just have to close shop. Then I think like you to disband all these organs from West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, and North Africa to just form make EU work, because the EU is a toothless dog. This guy are just toothless guys, and then it's a disgrace. Like I thought you were gonna get somebody like Mandaza from Zimbabwe to talk
Tulani,
about
Tulani, we do need to work together. What has happened in the past is that Africa has been divided, and it's the reason why it's been taken advantage of. It's the reason why its resources have been depleted, because the countries have not been coming together. So the idea of SADC coming together, the idea of the African Union coming together is good, but should we perhaps limit it to economic cooperation as opposed to taking it through to the politics? Because as it appears now, it's not able to deal with the political situation in Zimbabwe as perhaps it's taken so long to deal with the political situation in Lesotho, for instance.
Yeah,
Tulani?
All right. Yeah, it has failed dismally to do anything. That's why it's be like EU in Europe will be working in all the countries in Africa. But currently, SADC is more bad.
Tulani, your line is quite bad, so I'm gonna have to let you go. But let's hear another one. Admire in Germiston saying SADC is trying to be clever. What do you mean, Admire?
Yeah, good evening. the listeners. What I wanted to say actually is, to be honest with you, I'm in my late 30s. SADC, to be honest, I don't see actually their input, especially in my country of origin, Zimbabwe. Right? Because they're talking about, you're saying actually we should concentrate on economics, not politics. Right? But these things are working hand in hand, because right now they're busy blaming sanctions. But I want to know that sanctions upon Zimbabwe or sanctions upon individuals who are mismanaging the country's finances and human abuses in Zimbabwe.
But my point really is that if you take care of the economics of any country, the political will by extension be taken care of.
Yeah, I do understand. I agree with you actually to a great extent. But my actual challenge is, can we eliminate SADC and deal with AU going upward? Because to be honest, SADC is useless to Zimbabwe. Very, very, very useless to Zimbabwe.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Admire. Now, let me go back to you, Sadiwick, in Gaborone, Botswana at the SADC Secretariat. And I'm just wrapping it up. Give us one project that has shown that SADC has done good work this year.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the projects, I think from the...
and I have a minute for you, Sadiwick.
Okay, from the political side, it's what Victor mentioned, that there are some progresses made even in the political space, and he mentioned Mozambique. That is one. But in the economic sector, if I can take one of the regional integration part, you talk of the free trade area, yes, but in order to trade, you have to transact financially. And the SADC has done a lot in this by introducing the SADC region real-time settlement system, which
Thank you very much.
Cuts down transactions across member states.
In Gaborone, Botswana, at the SADC Secretariat, Dr. Victor Shale, governance and elections scholar and political analyst, and in Zimbabwe, Rashid Mahiya, talking Zimbabwe, talking SADC, has it done anything for this region in the 40 years that it existed? Thank you so much for joining us on Inside EWN this week. I'm Nthakoana Ngathane. Join us again next week when we'll be bringing you more news from the Inside EWN team.